Hey team, welcome back to my channel. In this video, we're going to look at ASP.NET using Core 6. We're going to write Web API. Now this is a very gentle introduction. Hope you enjoy this. Let's create a new project for an ASP.NET Core 6 Web API. Go to the main menu, File, New, Project. Let's create a new project. Notice C# Windows Web. Then look for ASP.NET Core Web API. Change the project name to sample.api and then press Next. In Frameworks, pick .NET 6.0 and then all the checkbox except Enable Docker. Let's close down the overview. We don't need to use that right now. Creating a sample project creates two files that we're not going to use. Go into Controller and notice the two files I selected. Let's delete them. Your project is now set up. It's ready to go. Let's do this. We're looking now at program.cs, line 1, builder equals web application, create builder. And then we come down here and your original file only had this line. Notice I added add XML data contract serializer formatters. Now what does that mean? By default, our return value will be of type JSON. Using line 10, we can say application/XML, and guess what? We get XML. Now, no changes here. We want to use Swagger, Open API. It's kind of like defining and documenting your web service. And here you can see the output of Swagger. Notice you get the controller names, its methods, kind of like all the schemas that are involved if you've exposed them. Application app equals builder.build. Notice this is going to implement iHost and iApplicationBuilder. This is development environment to use Swagger. Now what we can do is figure out where this is at. So notice here, environment variables, ASP.NET core _ environment equals development. This is where that's reading from. So if this is development, you will get Swagger. Now we will just continue marching down, use HTTPS redirection, use routing, use authorization. And notice it looks a little bit different than yours. Use endpoints, and then we're going to say endpoints.mapControllers, then app.run. And that finishes up program.cs. Let's add a class to this project. Right click, add class, and the name of that class will be country, and then say add. Let's now add two properties to the country object. Let's add our first controller to the project. Right-click on controller folder, add controller. Let's make sure you click on Common API and then API controller empty. Now be careful here. Make sure you pick API controller empty, and then let's come down here and give it a name. Notice we're using capital country controller .cs. And then hit the add button, and there you have our first controller. Let's look at line 6, route API / bracket, and then the word controller. Well, what's that all about? Ready? Look at line 8. See how it says country and then the word controller? This is smart enough to come out here and then lift that off there. So this would be API / country. Now, if you don't like that, of course, you can come here and say country, and that will work also. Let us begin with just the boilerplate. Notice this right here is the method we're going to use. Some people also call this the HTTP verb. Now, this is public. That means people are going to be able to see this. And now, return value is JsonResult. Notice the name of the function is called get. Let's now code this up just to return a JSON object. So here we go. We're going to say return new JSON result. Then we're going to say new country, and then ISO code USA, name is United States. Notice I'm going to return that. The resulting value is going to be of type JSON. Let's compile this and see what it looks like. Remember in program.cs, we told the default setup, hey, when I'm in development mode, I want Swagger, and this is what Swagger is right here. Notice it says get API country. Try it out. Come down, say execute. We got a 200. That means everything's good. ISO code USA, United States. And here we are in Postman. Notice I say HTTPS localhost 7099. How did I know that? Well, Remember when we pulled up Swagger? Swagger first identified 7099 for me. And then I say, okay, what is the API? So it's API/country. And then I say send, and then notice that goes and gives me back the ISO code and the name. And here is our second example. Notice I started off with HTTP GET, and then I said route/all. Remember in our first example, I didn't use it. And it was as if I'd used this command right here, route, and then nothing, or just slash, and that would have been fine as well. And now /all, when I call that from my web service, it's going to say get all countries. This is the method it will execute. Now these need to be unique, all these routes. Now notice at the top where I use this global one that says, hey, I want to concatenate this with each of these. So if I take this out, and make this go bye-bye, let's just comment that out, then what I'd have to do is I'd have to come down to each one of these and put it at the beginning of this, like right here, right? And then let's copy that down to the next one, Control-C that, and put it here. Does that make sense? So I'll run it like this the first time, and then we'll go back to using the global. So notice here, I'm still returning a JSON result, but now I'm returning a list of country, USA, down to Ecuador. Let's run this and see what happens. So I first pull up Swagger. Notice I have API country and then API country all. Well, let's make sure this one still works because we changed it a little bit, and then say execute. And notice we should just have one entry. Notice it's a 200. 200 means response is good. Second method, API country all. We should get a list. Execute. We have a 200 and we have United States down to Ecuador, 200. And that is Swagger. Let's see what Postman offers. Notice here, 7099 API country send. It just returned us the one. That was the very first one we wrote. And then when we say all send, notice that we get back a list. United States down to Ecuador. And that is our second example. I reinstated line 7. I changed lines 13 and 23. Let's see what that looks like now in Swagger. Notice the full path is not here in the route, but it still executes the same. Try it out, execute. We get our one entry. Second one, get, try it out, execute. We should get a whole list. There you go. So you see the difference. Decide which way you like best and then proceed. Let's create a new controller. Right click on controller, add controller, and then go to common API empty, add, and our name this time is going to be a little longer, country action result controller CS, add, and now we have our second controller. You remember what the open bracket, close bracket, the word controller means. As you may have guessed, this controller is going to be working with action result. That is going to be the type of return value in a couple different versions. Let's start with forming a data source, and it is a list of countries, and we're going to make it static for this object. Notice now it's saying country. I don't know where that is because notice up here we don't have our using, so we can come down here, click that, and say using sample API models. Now that is reference. Our static class is now available. Now how can we use this in our program? So our first method inside of country action results controller is just get. We know that's API/country action result. It is going to get a list of all the countries. And notice it's returning an IActionResult. Let's actually see what that means. Here is our second controller, country action results. Let's get that. Let's then try it out, and then let's execute this. And notice that we get all 6 countries. Notice here we're returning an IActionResult. Let's see the difference between that and remember our last example, it was JsonResult. Notice that when I execute this, I can get back a JSON. Here we see our 6 countries. But now what I can do is see where it says accept. I can actually come over here and say, I don't want JSON anymore. I want XML, and then hit send. And then notice that we get XML as our output. I didn't change anything in our program. If you remember at our program.cs, do you remember when we added this line on line 10? That's what gave us that capability. So now we can either accept application JSON or application XML. We're now ready for our second example. Notice we changed up action result to now include a type. Here I'm giving you of type list country. Notice our route API country action result / use type. Let's compile this and see how we can run this. In Swagger, we have our new method here, use type, get, try it out, and then execute. And then notice we get the results. We got our 6 countries. Now also notice that we have now exposed the data type. We now see schemas. Notice we have country, and then country has 2 properties, ISO code and name. Remember in program.cs on line 10, that's what gave us that XML. Let's now comment this out, run it again, and see if that works. Notice I say accept application JSON. Let's execute this. Notice I get JSON. Remember, I commented out the code that says XML is now available. What happens when I say show me some XML? You guessed it, I get the default. I only get back JSON. So in our third example, we're going to create another controller called country2controller, and then we're going to have 3 methods. Let's do this example. To add a controller, just right-click on controller, add. Well, I'm running right now, so controller is locked up. So to get that to work, you'd have to say stop, and then add controller. And then notice that we have, it's very misleading that I can just go through there and add, but you have to come up here to API empty, and then hit add. And then what you want to do is, ready, make sure that you pick API controller empty, and then give it a name down here, controller2controller, and then hit add, and then we will have our next controller to work with. Now that we have this controller, it should look like this, and notice the bracket open, bracket close. You understand what this means. The controller will pick up controller2. Now you'll notice that when I have a / in the route, when we load up the program called Swagger, the URL looks different. So if you use slashes in here, then what happens is the URL just looks a little different. Let's see what that looks like. So notice here we used a /, so I just got a /, and then get list 2. Well, that's API controller 2 get list 2 and get list 3. You see how that works. And look here, if I don't use a route name, when it gives me my route, it shows me the base route, API country 2, and we know this is the get. In this example, the difference is we're going to be using async. And I have 3 different flavors in here. Notice the return values. One time I'm just using the interface, task IActionResult. The second one is I'm using task ActionResult, the class, and then list country. It's different from this. And the last one I'm using async task, and then just the object, list country. Now each of these are different a little bit. Let's just look over. Now the first one, notice I say country is new list. Let's add a new entry to that list, return that list. Kind of very easy to understand. API country 2, that's the get. I executed it. I get the response 200. Everything is good. First one all done. Our second method is going to have a return value of task action result, a list of countries. Notice here I'm defining my list, my variable. I'm going to add 6 countries, and then I'm going to return that country. You'll notice that on this first one, line 15 and line 26, there are squigglies underneath the function name, and you're probably wondering why. Well, what it's really saying to you is, you'll look here at the error message. It's saying this async method lacks await operators and will run synchronously. That's what that's saying. So notice there is no await operator in here. So if this one gets, I don't want to say demoted, but it now will do this function synchronously, not async. In our third example, get list 3, notice async task list country, name of the function, But notice here we have an await. Now, notice no squigglies, like in getlist2 and get. It has no squigglies because this is truly an asynchronous function. Now, what does await mean, just in very basic terms? I think I can best describe this with a small chart. So I have this web service, and inside that web service, I have some kind of object, and it's got a function in there called getlist3. And we're saying, I want you to behave asynchronously. Now, on compile time, I figured out that there was an await operator in there. And what that's going to do is it's going to identify that this function is a true asynchronous function. Then what happens is when someone calls that either through like a web page or an app or Postman or even through Swagger, as soon as this gets called, a thread gets assigned to this method. And it will stay over here until it hits this line called await. Now, when the running program sees await, what it's going to do is record the line number that's on. Notice in this example, that is line 44, and it's saying var countries equals await, and then this new task. Do you see the thing that I highlighted? So watch what happens in the diagram. Before I start executing that part that was highlighted, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give back this thread to the thread pool. That allows this thread to go get busy on some other call. But for the code that was in that highlighted area, I'm going to keep doing that until it's done. That could take like half a second to 100 seconds. Who knows, right? Just finish. Now, when it's finished, it then comes back over to await, and then await sends a message back to the thread pool that says, I'm done, reassign a thread to me. Now, the original thread that was assigned to that does not have to service it. It will get the next one available. Imagine the first 4 are busy doing something. It will take this one and then reassign it. This thread will then finish up what it was doing, and then as it pops off, this thread will go back to the thread pool to keep working. And that is the way the await works. The await gives the thread back to the thread pool, does its work, and then continues when this is all finished. I hope that made sense. That's kind of the way I understand it. So here's the action. The await gives the thread back to the thread pool. When this finishes, a message gets sent over to the thread pool that says, hey, I'm done running this. Give me a thread to finish up. It will then take the results of whatever ran over here and then do an assignment to this variable, this object, if you will. And then I'm all done. I return countries, and then I give the thread back to the pool. That's the way that works. So now, looking at the big picture, you understand when you see these underscore, those squigglies, and someone called it async, without even opening this, you know what's going on now. We didn't use an await clause operator. Now down here, we use one, and we understand how this works with a thread pool, giving it back and reassigning it. I'm sure like the underneath, the engine of this has some kind of position that tells me, hey, on line 44, he gave it back. And when I'm done with this, when I'm done with this code, reassign that task to continue at line 44. Something like that must happen. And there you have the third example. And there you have it, team, a gentle introduction to Web API using a .NET 6.0. Hopefully you learned something from this video. Appreciate it. And I appreciate you support my channel. I'm going to have part 2. Part 2 is going to be talking about, just more stuff along with Web API. And the goal at the very end, of course, is hitting Entity Framework. Okay, team, that'll wrap it up. Please consider a thumbs up if you think this video, deserves that. Maybe a comment, post other messages to other programmers, and if you want to keep following my channel, please consider subscribing. Other than that, have a great day, and we'll see you back in my next video.